What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Falcons Final Whistle podcast. I'm Scott Bair here with Tori McElhaney and Kris Rhim. The day after the Super Bowl, the NFL offseason has officially ended. The Rams beat the Bengals with everybody saw what happened. But Rams and Bengals, Rams are Super Bowl champions. And it really kind of got us thinking that the Bengals were, let me check Pro Football Reference again. They were 2-14, and then they were 4-12, and then they were in the Super Bowl, right? Which basically gives optimism to literally anyone.
Everyone in the league is now looking at the Bengals being like, oh my gosh, can we be them? Can we be the next Bengals?
Right. So I think that poses the question, right? And there have been lots of articles written about this. Can your insert team name here be the Bengals, right? So what the heck, right? Can the Falcons be the Bengals? Falcons won. They won 4 games 2 years ago. They won 7 last year under Arthur Smith. I think we can all agree that their arrow is generally pointing up with a lot of work left to do, but there's a lot of teams that go from worst to first. There's a lot of teams that turn a very high draft pick into something spectacular a couple of years down the line. And can the Falcons do that? Are they in a position to do that within relation to their what's going on within their division? So we're going to look at all that stuff. Basically, over the course of the next half hour or so, we're going to talk about whether the Falcons can do that. What's the key ingredient for the Bengals? Not named Joe Burrow. Then we're going to talk about Joe Burrow, the former LSU/Ohio State quarterback who brought glory to his home state. And then where do the Falcons go to try to forge their way into becoming playoff contenders? Once again, I'm just reading from Tori McElhaney's notes. I didn't come up with
You're welcome
myself. That's why I use the word forge. That's a Tori word, but I like it.
That's a Tori word for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, so we're going to break all that down. So I guess generally speaking, what are your kind of thoughts on this Bengals rise? And is there anything, just generally, off the top of your head, Tori, let's say, about if the Falcons can do that and what was the key for you for the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of looking at it and then also kind of just looking at the articles that were written this morning throughout the course of the last, honestly, probably 12-ish hours since the Bengals and the Rams, the Super Bowl began. It was all just kind of looking at, okay, everybody's kind of essentially being like, this whole idea of worst to first and who can be the next team in the league to go worst to first. Because when you look at it, the Bengals were last in the AFC North in 2020. And as Kris Rhim pointed out before we even started recording this, they were last until like week 9 of this past season. I mean,
well, they were first at early on, and then they lost.
And then they were last. There you go. And so I think when you think about that, and then also kind of thinking about what the 2020 season was, where you lose Joe Burrow, and he's now coming into this season coming off of a torn ACL. And I mean, you really do think about everything that happened to this Bengals team, and then for them to get to the point of where they are not just like Super Bowl, like in the Super Bowl, but like pretty good contenders with the team that I think everyone expected to be in the Super Bowl because of how the team was constructed, i.e. the Rams. So I think for me, like when you're thinking about this whole idea of the league moving forward, I think when you have where everybody's kind of on this equal playing field, I think it makes it more fun. I think that's what the league wants, is that everybody to kind of be on this level playing field where you don't have, the New England Patriots going out and winning however many Super Bowls in a row. You want that parity. And so I think this idea of the Bengals being this team going from worst to first is like it's what you want the league to be. And I think it gives you hope for a team like the Falcons and where they currently are in their own division.
Yeah, and I'd probably say the same. I think it kind of shows that I think football, more than any other sport, is like luck is so much involved in football. So without getting into everything, I think the stars have to align like they did for the Bengals this year, and you have to play good football. It doesn't matter when you play bad football, as long as you're playing good football when it matters. And if you can get hot for 3 games, you might be in a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So, and I think
timing really is everything. It really, truly is in this league more than I think any other.
Yeah, that's the Cardinals.
Yeah, 100%. Talk about a team that peaked really early and then obviously didn't know how to handle it. Now they got reports about their quarterback being unhappy. It's just, that things can turn really quickly. And I do think that getting hot is important. I think the other phase of it is that a team has opportunities when they go through struggles and they get these high draft picks, right? Do you make the right selections? And the Bengals made a selection on Joe Burrow, and then they made a selection on Jamar Chase, right? Nailed those. And that put them in a great position to be something special because you have obviously with a quarterback, but when you had a player like Jamar Chase, right? Like a talented individual, he's a game changer. When you add that, then it gives you an opportunity to maybe go out and beat a team that you're not as good at on paper because Jamar Chase is just going to go do some things, right? So I think for those reasons, it's definitely possible. It's definitely interesting. I was reading 2-14 and then 4-12. Well, probably wouldn't have gone 4-12 if Joe Burrow was healthy that year, but nonetheless, that you're seeing that this team kind of evolve and get hot at the right time and end up in the Super Bowl. That's also why at the end of the Super Bowl, like for the loser, you always say, oh, their future's so bright. They got this, they got that. There is no guarantee you'll ever get back there. So take advantage of the opportunity. Go ask Dan Marino. He made it his second year and then never again. There's a lot of situations like that where you think, okay, this is going to be like a dynasty type team, but maybe not, maybe that was your one opportunity, but with the ability to fall backwards is the ability to ascend. So we're going to kind of talk about all that stuff. But before we do, we have to offer a big thank you to our sponsor, Microsoft Windows 11, the official operating system of the NFL and the Atlanta Falcons. The all-new Windows 11 is here to bring you closer to what you love, like the Falcons Final Whistle podcast, as you've heard me say. Learn all about the awesome new features of Windows 11 at windows.com. So as we move forward through this pod here, let's go back to our first kind of original question that Tori had broken out here, which is now no longer directly on my screen. So basically, what do you think was the key ingredient for the Bengals in 2021? ... Not named Joe Burrow.
Yeah. I mean, we can't talk about Joe Burrow next because that's my next question for you guys. So we'll get there for people listening. Just if you want to go ahead and listen to us talk about Joe Burrow for a few minutes, just click on through. You can fast forward through this section, but don't do that because we're going to say some cool things. Maybe, probably not.
Knowledge.
We're going to drop some knowledge, drop a mixtape too. There's this one picture of Kris and I from our introductory, when we did our photo shoot when we were coming to the Falcons. We're like back to back, and it's significantly like mixtape material. Like when Kris and I drop a mixtape, that will be the cover photo on the album. So just letting everyone know.
Some big chains Photoshop onto you, Tori, and Scott too. We'll just have Photoshop Scott laying down in the front.
There we go.
Striking a pose. That's great. There's also a good photo that one of our videographers captured of both of them doing like peace sign. Like I wouldn't fit in that. I don't think I'm cool enough for that.
I'm not. That photo will never see the light of day. That is a
now
horrible.
I'm definitely posting it in the promotion thread. There's no doubt.
No, that is a terrible photo of me. I had a rough day. I think it was after the Braves won the World Series, and I had gotten my flu shot the day before, so I was not feeling
your
good.
Flu shot, quote unquote.
It was
story. Kind listeners, he was selling all day.
I would 100% own up if it was not the flu shot, and we all know it. So anyways, I was looking quite horrendous, and it was at practice, and it was horrible, and it's a shot of Kris and I. It's a shot of Kris and I just like throwing up the peace signs like as we were doing a mic check, and someone screenshot it, and it's horrible. And no, it will not be a part of the production of this podcast. Period.
You're saying that like you have any control over that, which is my favorite part.
I will
You need
just
to
be
come up with
very
some
upset.
blackmail for me between this recording and
know.
when it goes out, because otherwise you're in trouble.
Oh
All
my
right.
gosh.
It took us
We've gone
10
off the rails.
Yeah.
Sorry. Going back to the key ingredient for the Bengals in
The key ingredient
2021.
is building a good mixtape. That's how you build
Yeah.
team chemistry.
Yes.
Hey, Joe Burrow, I mean, he could probably go out and put together a solid like mixtape with this team. I do believe this team has a lot of coolness, a cool factor to it, which is why I like it. I don't think that's the key ingredient for the Bengals in 2021, their cool factor. But what I did, so going back to last night watching the Super Bowl, there was this one graphic that I thought they did that was really cool, where they were taking a look at this defense, this Bengals defense, and they had kind of everybody in their uniforms from the teams that they were on in the previous years. And now kind of fast forwarding to where they are now, where they're all on the Bengals. And I just thought that was super interesting, because I think when you think about the Bengals, you think about Joe Burrow and you think about Jamar Chase, and you think about them building up through the draft and going out and getting these guys in the draft. But I also thought it was important that they simultaneously found the right guys in free agency. And I think when you're thinking about where the Falcons are right now, I do put so much weight on the draft, but I also put a lot of weight in free agency, especially when you get into next year, when you think about them having more money to play around in free agency a little bit. And I think that's kind of where the Bengals were. It was a really good collection. This team, I thought, was a really good collection of guys they had drafted and developed, and also guys that they had brought in to kind of fill out this team. So I thought that was kind of, when you're thinking about like the key ingredient, we're talking about timing and we're talking about all of this kind of stuff. I think the timing of the draft and guys you picked up and the guys you picked up in free agency kind of marrying together to create this team was a pretty key ingredient for where they were in 2021.
Yeah, I think along with the free agents, I think Trey Hendrickson was one of their was the key ingredient to this team. I think their defense doesn't get enough credit for what they do and for what he does. He kind of makes me think of like what, Dick Butkus looked like, or one of those guys back in the 60s. He's no fluff, no gloves, no swag, no football swag on the field. You just have some long sleeves, keep putting his hand in the dirt, and he's coming at you every play. So he set the franchise record in sacks. They poached him from the Saints, which Falcons fans will probably like. And he balled for them, and against the Titans, you saw the kind of pressure they got, even though Joe Burrow was sacked 9 times. But along with that key ingredient, I think another, I don't know, this is not a key ingredient, but this is just another thing. When I was talking about before, things falling in the right direction and luck, the Ravens start 8-2, 8-3, then Lamar gets hurt and they go 8-9, I think, or 8 or something. They go 8-9 and they miss the playoffs. For some reason, the Steelers let their season continue with what was going on there on the quarterback position. I think the quarterback play that was happening there, and then what was happening with with the Browns was kind of insane over there. So I think not only did they, and this happens, I think for all teams, there's always luck involved, but I think within their own, their division is arguably theirs and the NFC West probably maybe others too, like the Chiefs division, but some of the hardest in the league to play in. So I think the cards aligned for them in terms of, I think Joe Burrow threw for almost 1,000 yards in 2 games against the Ravens, because I think all their defensive backs were hurt, minus Marlon Humphrey, and Jamar Chase embarrassed Humphrey at that, make the ball, take it slant. So I think not only was it, their defense and Trey Hendrickson, and they also had, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but Chidobe. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I don't want to mess it up, but it's Chidobe. His last name starts with the A, and he wears number 22. He was the 4th ranked cornerback in the league this year for PFF. So he also helped. But yeah, a lot of things happened around them that like the stars just aligned for them to get here.
Yeah,
I'm sorry we left you hanging on the pronunciation.
Yeah, I was
going to leave it alone.
Scott and I were
No, I don't want to. I don't want to I'm not trying to butcher anyone's name here. So
No, Scott and I think we're both just kind of looking at you like, God, I
You're on
hope he
your
gets
own,
there.
man.
But if I could not throw you a life raft. I wanted to. I could not. Even tried to start Googling his name and I couldn't do it in time. I'm so sorry.
But here's the crazy thing about him, right? Is that they signed him a 3-year deal for not very much, for $21 million over the course of 3 years, right? That's a good value signing. And most of that money is down farther into the deal. So you think, gosh, those are the types of things where you've got to hit, right? If you're adding kind of Falcons parlance to it, that like Trey Hendrickson wasn't cheap, but they identified a guy that could play for them and they invested wisely. They used 2 very high draft picks and invested wisely. And then they were able to, I mean, Eli Apple was basically on like a journeyman's path around the country, right? And he still may be, but they found a guy that was able to contribute and start for them and help that defense. So I just think there's so many examples of that, and that's how you do it. So I'm going to combine both of what you got of things that you guys are saying, that it's defense, it's finding these gems. It's also luck and understanding when to be opportunistic, right? That yes, how often is it going to happen that you're going to win a division that has Lamar Jackson and TJ Watt in it, right? And I don't know if the Browns will ever figure it out, but there's a lot of, and Myles Garrett, right? Like there's a lot of talent within the division, and I'm just naming superstars, but it's deep. It's really deep. So can you identify, all right, everybody's suffering a little bit, everybody's limping, let's go get it. And that's kind of the situation that they were in. So it's very possible, you know, when you talk about opening up a period of sustained success, or you talk about championship windows or being in control of a division, that doesn't mean that every year you're going to go, 13-5 or whatever. 30, you know what I mean? Like there's no guarantee that those types of things are going to happen. You go 13-4. But if you can look around and be like, Saints quarterback situation is weird. Tom Brady just retired. The Panthers are sticking with Sam Darnold, I guess. Right? You start looking at the lay of the land. You figure, okay, if we can just be smart with it, that we can find a way to capitalize on the situation. And we can get to more Falcon stuff as we move on here. But let's move on to the Joe Burrow-ness of it all, right? This isn't just like a team getting hot. This is a team that invested a number 1 pick in a quarterback, and he's playing like a number 1 pick. That was a good investment of that draft capital. Correct me if I'm wrong. Joe Burrow was like the consensus number 1. Like there was no drama in that, right? And then they got a guy and they nailed it, And I think how often did we hear it was like a forced narrative by the broadcast networks that the Bengals haven't won in 30 years. The Bengals haven't won in 30 years. Man, they've blown it a lot, over and over and over again. And every time Joe Burrow was like, I don't care about that. Like, I didn't know anything about that. Zach Taylor, who's younger than me, which I hate. What am I doing?
Wow, the resentment was
oh my gosh,
strong.
I want to be a head coach. Come on, man. But and Zach Taylor kept saying that they didn't care about the history, right? That this is something new. And I think that Joe Burrow brought that attitude and mindset, and I think that helped them. Like, we don't care what happened. That has nothing to do with us. We're doing our own thing, and he's just so confident. And I think that rubs off on people, in addition to the fact that, he's pretty good.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because so before we started this podcast, like I just kind of sent Scott and Kris like these questions, and the question was like, how do you begin to replicate the Joe Burrow impact? And the more I sit with that question, the more I'm like, that's such an unfair question, because you're not going to. And I think like Joe Burrow's impact for the Bengals is I mean, I can almost like not really put into words, because that's how much it means to this organization. And going back to Scott, what you were saying about how essentially, I mean, they invested in Joe Burrow and he panned out. I think you see a lot of times there are so many, I think, first round picks that just don't pan out. And he's somebody who did. And I think it just goes back to kind of the idea, if we're talking about the draft, how much of a freaking crapshoot it is sometimes, and how much it really is just kind of, you're just hoping that what you see on film and what you're in these interviews, the guys that you're interviewing, you just hope that they turn out to be what you want them to be. And I think like even using like, I don't know, you think about like Kyle Pitts, like you can look at his measurables and you can look at kind of him being the quote unquote unicorn and everything like that. And the Falcons investing a number 4 overall pick in him, but he still has to pan out and he still has to put in the work, and he still has to they have to figure out the best ways to use him and putting weapons around him. And I think like that's something that I thought the Bengals did very well, is that they gave Joe Burrow, I think, weapons and they gave him an opportunity to thrive while he's also learning the scheme and the system as a young quarterback in this league. So I don't know how a team like the Falcons begins to replicate something like Joe Burrow, but I think when you think about it, it all just kind of, it's just this idea of draft guys that you draft and bring in, developing and panning out. And I think that's kind of simply put.
Yeah, I mean, I think with quarterbacks in general, it's like, in order for situations matter more than anything else. And if you walk into a situation like we saw the top quarterbacks walk into this season, it oftentimes doesn't look that great. And a lot of times it's not really their fault. It's the, who's around them. So when you pair Joe Burrow with, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon, that's cool. But then once you pair him with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon and CJ, I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong too, so I'm not going to do that. But when you have those weapons, out there on the field, then it becomes very scary. I remember there was a before the 2021 draft, there was a meme that Bengals fans were circulating because many fans wanted the Bengals to draft Penei Sewell because of what we saw last night happen to Joe Burrow, what we saw happen to Joe Burrow all season. It was a meme where it was like draft Jamar Chase, and it was a stick figure. It was a stick figure being sacked, like fumbling the ball. And then it was like draft Penei Sewell, and it was a stick figure, Joe Burrow, protected. And then it was like another stick figure for any receiver. So it was like, you know what I mean? So the Bengals bet on a skill position and a star, and I think it still worked for the most part. I mean, I think they still need to, fix that offensive line before Joe Burrow ends up like Andrew Luck or something. But I think that was good. Yeah, I think ultimately I think with Joe, I think people, the cool thing with Joe Burrow is cool. Some people are going a little too far with the cool stuff, saying some stuff going a little bit too far with that stuff. But he's
that's social media in general. People take it way too far. It's like you can respect the coolness, but then don't get weird about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think his swag is what attracts people to him too. And even that, a comeback against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, all the players talked about how he was just cool the whole time. Like he wasn't yelling. He was the same guy. And that's great when your leader is that guy in the huddle. Your leader isn't shaking. He isn't nervous. He's saying, let's just do us. We're a second half team. And they did it. So I think how you replicate the Joe Burrow experience is find a quarterback that you're in love with. If you have the number 1 pick and Joe Burrow is there, draft him.
Take him.
But, if you have a guy that you're in love with, i.e. Patrick Mahomes, that you could trade up ahead of Chicago and get at 10, go get him, and make sure that when you get him, that quarterback can be surrounded by weapons. So how do the Falcons do that? Surround Matt Ryan with weapons.
Yep.
And if you want him to have a succession plan, maybe you get your Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes is sitting behind him and just ready to go. Maybe.
I couldn't agree more. And it goes back to what we were talking about in the very first podcast about Matt Ryan's future in Atlanta. And we were literally sitting here being like, just build around him so that you can go and get a quarterback and they can come in when the Matt Ryan era is over in Atlanta and be in a good position to be successful. I mean, that's exactly what we were talking about, like a month ago. Like, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Full circle, man.
I think know that. My bad. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, Arthur Blank, was very candid in the fact that they know there's a sunset for Matt. They've been talking about a succession plan for a couple of years. The beauty of where they are is they don't have to jump. So it's tough because going from worst to first, everybody thinks like the Bengals flipped a switch in 1 year. Nah, they didn't. It was more like a couple years built onto it. So how can you, I think the better question is not like, and I think people have to write the headline to this podcast correctly, because people may roll their eyes and think Falcons aren't going to the Super Bowl next year. And that's not what we're saying at all.
No.
Not it. But it's like, how can you accelerate this process where like the Bengals had the number 1 pick, which means the year before went really bad. They were starting Ryan Finley. Okay. And then they were able to accelerate it by a couple of key moves. So let's say that and top picks that made immediate impacts. So if we're looking at it from a Falcons perspective, knowing that they are probably going to have Matt Ryan for maybe this year, maybe the next, we're not sure. But nonetheless, if you have that quarterback in place, how do you make those jumps? It's interesting. You go back and you look at 2021 redrafts, right? And you see Micah Parsons instead of Kyle Pitts, right? And I don't think anybody's saying that's a knock on Kyle. I think Kyle was but if you could, my point is, if you can somehow go back to back with game-changing kind of generational type players, if you can draft Kyle Pitts in 1 year, and then you can come back at 8 and get a Micah Parsons type or a player at a premium position who can make that type of impact, then you can accelerate your process. They're obviously not going to go find I don't believe, I should say, that they're going to go find a quarterback at 8 and insert him, and they're going to follow the exact blueprint. But I do think that that's a way to do it, is make those top picks really count. We know the hit rate is half, that boom or bust, about 50%, maybe a little higher in the first round, but you got to find ways to stick. The tough thing is it's really easy. Like Kris was saying, they invested in skill players, right? The Falcons could go out and draft a tackle, and it's going to feel different, right? But they need dynamic players at premium positions. And I think that that's how you do it. If all of a sudden they can get a guy, go find Micah Parsons, Scott, like go find Patrick Mahomes, like that's not an easy thing to do. Right. But if you can find a guy who could, a game changer, then I think then you can kind of accelerate this process. That's my point. And I think that the Falcons still are working their way out of resources. But if you're answering this question, and I promise I'll stop talking, that you can look at it like, all right, well, can they get to the playoffs in 2 years instead of 3 or 4, like we've been talking, right? How is that possible? And I think that that's more the question that we're trying to answer, more than like the Falcons are going to the Super Bowl. Like, they still have a little ways to go, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where you just got to you got to use your resources well. I think bringing up, the cornerback example, that they've invested so well in so many different places that allows them to jump. So
I think you have to hit on the draft, and also in, like you said, in free agency, like Tori was talking about. They had a graphic up where I think it was like their entire secondary had on different uniforms last year, or almost all their secondary had on different uniforms last year. So
that was the graphic. That was the graphic that I was talking about. It was legit. Right. Like they had they literally took their defense and was like, okay, they pieced it together through free agency, and I think there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, so often people say, I've probably written, that free agency can be fool's gold and you can spend the money incorrectly. But there are also examples of free agency being super productive. Like you think about the Patriots dynasty, right? They can be very active in free agency, like a lot. Like they can come out with a huge haul of guys that can contribute, So I think that it's about using it right and finding the right guys for you that fit into your system, and maybe investing heavily, right? For as much as we say the Falcons are in salary cap trouble, and they are, you can make it. I mean, look at the Rams. Like you can make anything work in terms of you want to structure a contract in a funky way to go get a bigger name player. I mean, you could sort of do that, right? May not be wise, but you can sort of do that in a way that you can accelerate your process. So, and I think the time is now for the NFC South. Now we could be talking in May, and the Bucks could have Russell Wilson or something. I'm just saying, and the division looks and feels a lot different. But as we sit here, as the offseason truly begins, you think, all right, iron's hot. They have the best quarterback in the division, just build up around Matt. So it's possible. That's what we're saying.
We're selling hope. We're not selling. Right. Yeah, we're not selling like like facts. We're selling hope.
Right.
My thing is too about the whole Bengals team too. I think like it's very possible. I don't even know. It's very possible for the Bengals to be like 6-11 next year. Like
100%. Thank you for
100%.
saying that.
Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Like it's not
absolutely.
like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like they're like they definitely haven't arrived. Like I don't think they're like, you know what I'm
No,
saying? Like,
yeah.
like I don't think it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's very easy.
You can't look at that offensive line and how many times Joe Burrow was sacked and be like, yeah, the Bengals have arrived. Like,
Yeah,
you just can't.
Yeah, that I wanted to say that too. Like it could have been, you know, lightning.
They caught.
Scott began this with Dan Marino. It could very well be that. It could.
That's the thing. Like they caught lightning in a bottle in 2021 and they ran with it. And I think like that's what everyone else is trying to do, unless you're the Rams and you are willing to give up so much draft capital to build the team that you want now. That's essentially what everybody else is trying to do.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's possible that in 2 years, if you strike at 4, which they have done, and then you can strike at 8 and be smart with your depth, then then they get hot and then they get healthy. Gosh, how many can, so
many contingencies. Yeah.
Right. But that's part of our point is that the service level thing is, oh, wow, the Bengals had 4 wins, then they're in the Super Bowl. Right. And that's an easy thing to say. It's a little more complicated when you dive into how they were able to do it and how another team can be able to do it. A lot has to go right. A lot you have to get right. And that's kind of our point is that, worst to first may look like very, awesome or wow you on their Pro Football Reference page. But if you get into what it took to have that happen, it can be a bit more complicated. So with that said, I think we've answered another great truth about
honestly, Scott, best of luck writing the headline for this podcast, because I'm thinking about what I'm going to write the headline for the written version of this. And I truly have no idea because people are going to misconstrue so many different ways that we write this.
Because we don't want to get ratioed, man. We don't want to get
that's all we want. We want to get ratioed on Twitter. That's our
right.
dream and our goal.
Right. So instead of ratioing us on Twitter, why don't you go to Spotify or iTunes, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and say something nice about us on YouTube. That would be sweet. And yeah, man, dive into the pod, understand what we're saying. It's nuance. That's what we're trying to bring to the conversation. That's what we're trying to bring to the people. Anyway, this thing's gone on about 37 minutes. Zoom is telling me that the whole thing is going to shut down in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So nonetheless, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again next week.